This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
The idea of mindful leadership is not exactly new. In an essay entitled Instructions to the Head Cook, Dogen, the founder of Zen in Japan during the 13th century, advised that the head cook embrace 3 core practices, or 3 minds, while leading the kitchen. These are joyful mind, the mind that accepts and appreciates everything, grandmother mind, the mind of unconditional love, and wise mind, the mind that can embrace the reality of change and be radically inclusive. Mindfulness practice itself originated within rich spiritual traditions that have developed and transformed over thousands of years. Historically, people tend to be drawn to mindfulness practice during times of rapid change, which are accompanied by high levels of stress, volatility, and uncertainty. Times much like those we live in right now. In addition, over the centuries, mindfulness has been adapted and integrated to meet the most vibrant and pressing needs of society, not only influencing spiritual traditions, but seeping into many facets of daily life and culture, including the arts, food, education, work, and beyond. Valeria Tellez interviews Mark Lesser, the author of 7 Practices of a Mindful Leader, Lessons from Google and a Zen Monastery Kitchen. Mark Lesser is a speaker, facilitator, executive coach, workshop leader, and Zen teacher. Mark helped develop the Search Inside Yourself mindfulness program within Google and was the founding CEO of Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. Mark founded and was CEO of 3 companies and has an MBA degree from New York University. Prior to his business and coaching career, he was a resident of the San Francisco Zen Center for 10 years and director of Tassajara Zen Mountain Center and the first Zen monastery in the Western world. Meet Mark at marklesser.net. Here is the interview with Mark Lesser.
In your own words, who is Mark Lesser?
Oh, you're going to start with the hardest questions.
Right. Yes.
Well, I'd say that Mark Lesser is a seeker and a author and a father and a husband and a Zen teacher, a mindfulness teacher. Yeah, that's a place to start.
When you say seeker, so that kind of inspired me to ask you a question. What are you seeking?
I recently mentioned several books that I was suggesting that people read, and one of them, I think I recommended 2 books by Shunryu Suzuki, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and Not Always So. And I also recommended Peter Senge's book, The 5th Discipline. And I said to summarize these 3 books, the world is not what it seems.
Right.
And I think, so I'd say that I'm seeking to understand the world more. And I'm seeking to understand what reality actually is, and noticing that we can't help, we can't help to be interpreting reality. But I think there's something about recognizing that, of course, we are filtering everything through our senses. We're filtering everything through our past experiences, our assumptions and beliefs, and I think that assumption opens up, like that if you live with that understanding, then we're all seeking. We realize that what we are experiencing is a partial, is very limited in some way.
I agree 1,000 times. And I wonder if it is possible to live without assumptions and without beliefs.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, me too, Mark. What comes to mind when you think about the closest way of navigating this reality without assumptions, judgment, and beliefs?
Yeah, I don't think there's, it's not that there's anything wrong with
Right.
assumptions, judgments, and beliefs. I think as long as there's some awareness that we're always and that, so like as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm really aware, I'm aware and curious, really interested in what your assumptions and beliefs might be, what mine are, what we have in common, and what I can learn from you right here in this moment, in this conversation.
That might be the closest thing, just being open to what comes the way it comes, what's happening now, what life is bringing, presenting.
Yeah, I mean, I also think about when the other thing that I thought of, the other road I considered going down when you asked me that question was thinking about meditation practice, and especially doing long retreats. And I feel like there's some deeper touching of a different way of seeing and being that can happen when, kind of just as much as turning off all of the usual doings and distractions that we have in our lives.
There's one section in your book, Keep Making It Simpler. That really resonates for some reason.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's and in some way I think it's very interesting, intuitive of you in the way that you started this conversation to bring in that particular practice, because I think in some way the keep making it simpler is it's an aspiration. It's something that I think I'm seeking for, right? I'm seeking. So when that would have been a good answer. I'm seeking to simplify. I'm seeking to strip away the things that don't matter so much, and I think that's that's often how I describe that practice, is the practice of seeking for and coming as close as possible to what really matters in your life, what really matters in your relationships, in your work, in your actions. That there's some sense of the word the word simple. It doesn't quite do it, but I think there is something about, right, keep making it simpler. It has a good feeling about it.
It kind of it makes me like breathe deeper.
Yeah, when I in doing, I've done a fair amount of teaching and talks about these 7 practices of a mindful leader, and I find when I get to the 7th one and I say keep making it simpler, people's shoulders drop a little
Mm.
bit, right? There's like, yes, all these, so many things we're supposed to remember,
Right.
all these things we're supposed to do. Just let it all go. Just keep making it simpler.
Before we talk about some of the topics in your book that will include the 7 practices of a mindful leader. So your book subtitle is Lessons from Google and a Zen Monastery Kitchen. What is your idea and understanding of success? What is to be successful?
Success. I don't know. Success. I think, well, maybe a simple definition, loving yourself and helping others would be, I think, success. Maybe a more practical definition might also include some kind of depth in relationships and financial sustainability. Right. So if I think about like what do I think of as business success, would include financial sustainability, but would include probably some combination of serving. It's about business success would be about service, would be about serving others.
Yeah. And that brings me to the topic of unconditional self-love. It's a question that I often ask. Do you believe in unconditional self-love?
Of course. Yeah, I think, I believe in unconditional self-love as well as conditional self-love. Yeah. And I think for whatever reason, we humans have a hard time with it. I think it's somehow connected to our evolution, that we've evolved, I think, to feel dissatisfied, right? That this is a big part of our evolution. Being dissatisfied is good for staying alive and passing on our genes, right? Always, and it's good for it's good in a way for discovery and growth and travel and movement. Like we're never quite dissatisfied with where we are, what we're doing, or what is. And there can be a very positive aspect of that not being satisfied, but the shadow side of it, I think, is the self-judgment and not accepting ourselves, not appreciating ourselves, not loving ourselves.
Yeah. What is love to you, Mark?
Well, I've had to think about this a lot since the first practice in the 7 practices is love the work.
Right.
Love the work. Yeah. So I think love is compassion and kindness and joy and equanimity, which is I'm kind of cheating a bit. I'm kind of leaning on a Buddhist definition of love. These what I just named are these 4 practices, which in a way are 4 practices that in a way describe love from a Buddhist perspective of kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. I think it's a pretty darn good definition.
How did you become a Zen teacher?
I've often told this story of that. I was just minding my own business. I was a psychology undergraduate student at Rutgers University, and started to get through reading books about. Actually, it was the best college class that I had was French, German, and Italian literature and translation, and being introduced to some of the great thinkers in the European tradition, from from different centuries, just opened me up to something, and that led me to start studying philosophy and existentialism, and which kind of brought me to introduce me to different spiritual traditions, including Zen. And there was something about the practicalness and the mystery and the sense of Zen seemed to have a real sense of humor, even about it, even about itself. And so I ended up taking a 1-year leave of absence, and during that time, I went to San Francisco, and I walked into the San Francisco Zen Center one day, and kind of fell in love with the physical practice of meditation, the ceremonies, the study, and the people and the community of people who were, I thought, the level of intelligence and sincerity, I thought, were a really compelling combination. And and in some way that 10 years of being a resident at the Zen Center kind of ended up being incredibly formative in my life, in the work that I do. I met my wife there, and I think it actually took me a long time before I actually started teaching. I think there's something I think very Zen. I think poses a good deal of caution about teaching. It's like just keep practicing, just keep practicing. And I would say that I did that for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years before I ever kind of stepped out and even considered teaching.
Yeah, I'm wondering why that is. Do you have some ideas?
I think there's the Zen tradition. So Zen in some way is a particular brand, a particular flavor, particular tradition, but it leans on and it grows out of the Buddhist tradition. So I think there's so much breadth and depth to understand, and no one will ever, even if you get your PhD in Buddhist studies, you'll only touch on particular aspects. So I think there was something about just wanting to be as experienced and knowledgeable as I could possibly be, and still I feel like, in truth, I'm not all that much of a scholar. And during the 10 years that I lived at Zen Center, I was mostly interested in the practice, and it's only in the last several years that I feel like I've delved into really trying to understand Buddhism and Zen, and have become incredibly passionate about my own study and my own understanding of the tradition.
What do you think is the main purpose, or perhaps the ultimate purpose, of the human experience?
Yeah, I think it goes back to those two things that I mentioned earlier around, seeing reality, and maybe skillful means or effective action. So, and I think those two things, I think the more that we're able to see with clarity, the more we're enabled to actually help others and do things that matter, and the more we're actually able to step in and act effectively, it helps us to grow and see ourselves more deeply.
You say meditation means living with eyes wide open. Talk to me for a moment about the connection between meditation and mindfulness. Some people confuse them. I did in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's very confusing.
Right.
Yeah, I think, there, and then of course you could ask, and what is mindfulness meditation,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is another phrase. Yeah. So, but I think of meditation as a particular practice. Meditation as a practice of stepping outside of the usual activities of our lives, the practice of knowing ourselves and going beyond ourselves, the practice of letting go of everything. I love, in the Zen tradition, especially in Soto Zen, which is the tradition that I trained in, the founder of Soto Zen, Dogen, said, basically, forget about meditation. There is no such thing as meditation. Just take this particular posture. Just let go of your usual thinking, your usual judgments. So this is meditation. Mindfulness. I think mindfulness is sits on, I think, the early Buddhist teaching of the four foundations of mindfulness: mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of our feelings, mindfulness of our mind, and mindfulness of the patterns of how we see ourselves and the world. So mindfulness, I think of as a series of practices that under this umbrella that we call mindfulness.
Right. So, yeah, I like that the meditation being just letting it go, the surrender component.
Yeah, yeah, and I think again, I think it's also useful to think about meditation as calming the mind and insight, right?
Mm.
The shamatha meditation as calming the mind, and vipassana meditation as insight. So I think, yeah, I don't want to leave listeners with this dreamy sense of meditation. There's also something, there's also, I think, a precision about meditation, as well as this kind of radical flexibility.
So, talk to me about this idea of becoming a mindful leader. But before that, what is a leader to you? What is your definition of a leader?
Yeah, in some way, I like to say that we are all leaders, and that from one perspective, of course, when we hear the word leader, we think of a particular role in an organization or a company, and that is a very, very specific type of leadership. But for any of us, there's no avoiding working with others. So we're, almost all of us so leadership is about influence, I think. So if even if we're not in a leadership role now, maybe we were, maybe we will be, or maybe we are on some kind of a team. Even if you're a one person business, you're kind of leading and running that that organization and influencing others that you're working with.
And the mindful leader, what would that be? What would that look like?
Yeah, well, the easy way out for me to answer that question is that it would be to follow these 7 practices.
Right.
That it would mean that you are loving the work of awareness, of mindfulness, so that you're actually doing the work, that you're not being an expert, that you're connecting with your pain and the pain of others, that you lean into depending on others, and that you're making it simpler. So in some way, my writing in this book was in some sense one attempt. It's certainly not the only definition, but these 7 practices are, I think, a way to talk about how would I define, and what does it look like to practice mindful leadership.
Right. And I'll be asking you more questions about it. I think I selected some quotes, some passages in your book that really attracted my attention for some reason. But before that, let me ask you three more questions, those open questions. What is the meaning of freedom to you? What is to be free?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to your, there's an awful lot of overlap with freedom and love and seeing, and seeing reality and not being caught by our limited versions of reality and limited beliefs. So I think that's a definition of freedom is not being caught by our limited beliefs.
Caught in a sense of letting limiting beliefs influence and lead us and drive our behaviors. Would that be it?
Yeah, and I think having the ability to respond effectively, appropriately. There's that. It's funny. What I think of as famous is these sort of famous lines and stories are famous in a very narrow tradition, but in Zen there's a dialogue. What is the most essential teaching of a lifetime, or what is the essential teaching of 1,000 lifetimes? And the answer is an appropriate response. So in some way, freedom, I think, is the ability to respond appropriately, right? We're always responding to our environment, to other people.
If you knew you would lose the body soon, would you change anything in your life or do anything differently?
Not really. I feel like it's important to me that I think so much of mindfulness practice and Zen practice, this whole, impermanence. And although I'm often joking that I'd like to start a support group called Buddhists Against Change, because I find my own resistance to change and my own resistance to impermanence. But no, I feel like, especially right now, this part of, and it's interesting. I think here we are I think the pandemic has brought me and all of us closer to that question that you're asking, because we're seeing that life, things are happening that we never really thought would ever happen, and that there's a sense of uncertainty, and living in that sense of uncertainty is a close relative, I think, to the question you're asking about the shortness of life and death. So I feel like I'm, for the most part, living just as I want to be living, and I'm not. I wouldn't make, if someone said I had a very short time left to live. Not very many changes that I can think of.
So, how did you become a writer, Mark?
Oh, am I a writer?
Oh, well, it's a title, I guess. Those who write books or anything.
Yeah. I think when I was in third grade, I was introduced to the form of a poem called the limerick, and I remember limericks just came pouring out of me in third grade, and I thought there was something miraculous about words, and words as music and poetry and meaning, and connecting through words. So I think I've always been fond of language and words, and then oddly enough, I think when after my 10 years at the Zen Center, I went to business school. I went to New York University Business School, and wrote one of the papers I wrote there was comparing. I was comparing two different books. I was comparing Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind with a business book called In Search of Excellence. And somehow when I was rereading that paper, I thought this could be a book. This would be a really interesting book to talk about Zen and business. And little by little, that writing grew into my first book, ZBA, Zen of Business Administration. And then from there, I kind of got hooked. Like I really love having a book project and taking ideas and letting them shepherd. It's like a shepherding process. I'm in another one right now. I'm kind of shepherding my next book, which I don't quite know what it is, but I like that part of the process, and as well as rail against it. Like it's very frustrating.
Yeah, right. Not to know.
but yeah. When is it going to? But then it's like just something about just keeping at it and seeing what emerges.
In the way, it writes itself. That's what has been my experience. The books I wrote, they just wrote it themselves.
Yeah, sometimes combination of letting them write themselves and sweat and hard work.
Right. Yeah. So true. Yes. There's a passage that I have here because it's really interesting. You say, becoming aware or more conscious of the pains and possibilities of our experience, of what is actually happening, whether that is in the world of work, community, family, relationships, or spirituality, is inconvenient and uncomfortable. So this is one of the practices in your book, or part of one of the practices. Talk to me for a moment about pain and possibility.
Yeah, that could have been the name of the book. Good title.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think that there's no avoiding pain, and there's something healing, wonderful. The pain of knowing that we're only here for a short time, the pain that we will lose everything, the pain of racism and our history and poverty, and so there's no shortage of pain. So, but there's something I think so important about not pushing it away, and there's also no shortage of possibility, which is also pretty interesting. That we have these incredible imaginations, and that our ability to imagine healing and ability to imagine a way that we create, invent, come together, love each other. Yeah. So, I mean, that's I think that's being a human being is somehow this great mix of pain and possibility.
And I wonder why most of us have this habit of pushing away pain, trying to lean toward always pleasure and what makes us feel good.
Yeah, I mean, who wants pain? I mean, of course, it's just I think natural. It's the most natural. It's the most natural thing, that it's our effort to stay alive, right? That we want to, of course, when we touch something hot, we pull away. We don't want to feel, and that it keeps us alive. But many, it's easy to take that way too far and avoid, just anytime you're feeling the slightest bit of pain, to pop a pill or to pretend it's not there. And So yeah, it's a process.
This habit of trying to run from pain all the time, it doesn't seem like it's coming from a wise place with space in us.
Yeah, or especially I think this avoiding of change and
Right.
impermanence, and
Yeah.
and I think that's where, going back to where we started this conversation about, these highfalutin topics of of reality and freedom, and that somehow how we exist in time, and 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 this recognition of change is so much but how we can, it's easy to say things like that, or easy to say things like life is short, or but to embody these practices and live these practices, and let others live these practices.
Another idea that you bring up, which is not a new idea, but it's so important to me, it feels like it's important. The idea of embracing failure that most of us run from. How do we learn to embrace failure and do the opposite?
Yeah, just seeing, I think that it's how we, one, there seems to be no avoiding it.
Mhm.
And, even, and even, it's interesting, even looking at, one of the teachings I really like is, do you live with a closed fist or an open hand? And, so if you accidentally, knock over your coffee in the morning,
Mhm.
are you all tight, and or is it, like, I failed, oops, I, and that uh, that little example, if you can start to extend that into larger and larger failure. So it's like, oh, I really messed up there. I didn't have that meeting on my calendar, um, or I said something, really hurtful, and I wish I could take that back. I'm going to need to really acknowledge that, and apologize. And so just again, failure is a kind of a powerful story and judgment, and a story and judgment that we can all learn a lot from.
If we are open and aware, right?
If you're open and aware, and of course, and even if I knock over my coffee and I tighten up, it's like, oh, there I am. Isn't that interesting? I'm tightening up over, it's like, why?
Right. Right. Oh, it becomes fun actually as a practice. Always to ask why. Why am I feeling this way? Why this? Why that? But in a light way. I made a note about imagination, you mentioned earlier, and thinking. Do you feel a different quality when you are imagining and when you are thinking?
Yeah, I mean, these are words that, we have no idea really what imagination is, or what thinking is.
Right.
We
That's
think we
true.
do.
That's true.
we can
Yeah.
we can we can imagine what we do, but I think in general, as the way that we use these words, I think maybe imagination perhaps is a subset of thinking. A lot of our thinking is maybe is worrying and ruminating and planning, but somehow the word imagination, at least for me, feels very uplifting, and is much more about what's possible, and seeing the present differently, or seeing the future differently. So something, I think, incredible and about these imaginations that we have.
Yeah, there's something freeing about imagining. Like you said, you connected to the word possibility.
Yeah, they can imagination. Did you ever read the what's the name of this book? I can't quite. I'm having trouble grasping the name of the book, but it's a book about it's a Frenchman who had some kind of I think an aneurysm or something, and he lost all movement, all sensation in his body. But he, the diving bell and the butterfly.
Yes.
Yeah, and he is able to blink one of his eyes, and one of the nurses is able to communicate with him through his blinking, and he writes the book, and he talks about how he's able to experience the finest food in the world, while he's in his hospital bed using his imagination.
I have a few more questions for you. I would say 2 more questions. Would you like to add anything, Mark, or read a passage in your book?
Sure. I'll take. I would take that opportunity. I wasn't. It's funny. It's been a while, but maybe just a paragraph or so from the epilogue. Why is mindful leadership and being a human being so difficult? Why does it take so much attention and effort to be present, to wake up to our lives, to discover again and again that we are not here long, and to pay attention to what is in our heart, to what is right here, to what is most obvious and most important right now? Reflecting on this, I can't help but think about my friends, the 3 apes who play a central metaphoric role in this book. They represent the evolution of our bodies, minds, and hearts, and our primary needs for safety, satisfaction, and connection. Human beings did not evolve, were not designed to see clearly, but primarily to survive, to pass on our genes. Being a mindful leader requires effort because it requires letting go of old constructed realities, the norms that no longer serve us, our organizations or our families, living with clarity and depth, living a mindful, integrated, warm-hearted life takes practice. Maybe that's enough reading.
That says a lot. I mean, your book is rich with so much information, valuable information, and practices and tips and suggestions. I mean, it's incredibly well written, and there's a lot of clarity in your book. Thank you so much for your message and your mission in this reality, Mark.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation.
What is another word for healing?
Loving.
What are 3 things about life you know for sure as of now?
Oh, I don't. I'm not sure what I know for sure. What I'm sure of is that there's very little I know for sure.
So it has been a peaceful conversation. Thank you, Mark, for your presence and your wisdom, sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do have one more technical question. Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
My website, which is marklesser.net. It's marklesser.net. And I lots of upcoming, starting to do more and more online courses that anyone can take, and also inside of companies. And I also do have a limited number of executive coaching clients. And I find myself doing trainings and workshops for lots of different kinds of organizations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Mark Lesser and his work, please visit marklesser.net.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.